Long goal. Rebound flash. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Ademeyer on the pick and roll. By Wade. This is going to be goes. Yes! He to
Welcome back to the Boozers Basketball Podcast. For tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about the Eastern Conference Finals and do a quick preview on Game 1. This is going to be a rematch between the number 1 seed Miami Heat and the number 2 seed Boston Celtics. And this is a highly anticipated rematch. The last time these two teams met in the playoffs was the 2020 Eastern Conference Finals in the bubble, where the Miami Heat won that series in 6. And so really excited as a Heat fan for this rematch and for the game tomorrow. And so, guys, just wanted to get your guys' opinions. I know right now the Heat, they're not favored to win the series. I think Vegas has them at like the Celtics at minus 165 to win the whole series.
Yeah.
A lot of the talking heads, on ESPN, NBA.com are predicting that the Celtics are going to win. A lot of people are saying 6, possibly 7.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, though, the Heat are actually favored at home, right? So the Heat are one of the only 2 undefeated teams in the playoffs left that are undefeated at home. So it's them and the Warriors who are also in the Western Conference Finals. So the Heat are projected to win tomorrow by -1, right? So it was -2 earlier, but now it's at -1. So Panos, let's start off with you. What's your prediction for tomorrow's game?
Well, I think the Heat are going to come out, and I actually think they're going to dominate just because that rest period for Boston Celtics, it's only 1 day. They only literally got 1 day of rest after a game 7 where everyone busted their butts to win a game, right? They put it all out on the line there. So I think with their perimeter defense, the scheming of Spo is going to help a lot. Also, looking at some stats earlier in the playoffs, I noticed that, today's game, it caters to the Celtics right here because they shoot a little bit better in 3-point percentage, but overall field goal is not that great. So I think they're going to rely more on the 3 in this series. But I think that's going to play in the favor of the Heat just because of their perimeter defense. They're going to be able to double and maybe even triple either Brown or Tatum in this situation. So I feel like they're going to force the Celtics to drive if they can. That's the goal, right? To force the Celtics to drive because their mid-range is not as great as their 3-point percentage. So, and it's a younger team as well. They do have more turnovers during this playoffs compared to the Heat as well. I think Tatum alone is averaging 4 turnovers per game right now in the playoffs. Neil, what do you think?
I have to agree with you in terms of the rest edge and a possible letdown spot for the Celtics. That was a really emotional series against Milwaukee. It was physical, and they poured all of their resources into slowing down Giannis, and now they're getting a completely different kind of challenge here. Meanwhile, the Heat have been able to kind of scout a little bit, start preparing the game plan. So they're going to come out ready to play. As Amir mentioned, they are undefeated at home in the playoffs. So I would have to give them the edge. And if we're looking at this from a series perspective, if the Heat can take game 1 and they have game 7 on their floor, you're starting to see the amount of games that Boston could steal one, which they're going to need to win the series, start to compress a little bit. So Boston needs to take this game seriously, but I just don't know if they have the effort in them to take this down in the first game. How about you, Amir? What do you think?
Game 1s typically are tough, right? So I want to say the Heat are going to win this game, but I think it's going to be like a really close game and a defensive battle. So I predict that both teams are probably going to score in the high 80s, maybe low 90s. And so I think I would take the under for every single game in the series. So both teams are really good, again, at switching, right? Like individually and collectively, these are the 2 best defensive teams left in the playoffs. The Celtics are
Yeah.
slightly better, I would say, than the Heat. And so they're both really good at defending folks individually and collectively, and they could switch pretty much. So Marcus Smart can switch onto Jimmy. I assume he's going to play against Lowry or Gabe Vincent initially, but he's a physical defensive player of the year, right? He can size up and guard a Jimmy. He can guard a Max Strus. Tatum and Brown can interchangeably switch as well, and even guard Bam if necessary, right? So maybe Williams, not Grant, but maybe Robert Williams, because of the knee injury, might be a little too slow for Bam or some of the guards. But he still is generally a really good rim protector and defender. But I think the Heat are going to win. They've had some rest. We're a little bit older than the Celtics. Unfortunately, Lowry's going to be out for this game. But
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
it's nice that we won in 6 and didn't play 7 games like the Celtics did, because understanding rest is important. And Panos, if you remember, speaking of the bubble, which I know we'll talk about in a second because this is a rematch of the bubble,
Yeah,
the Heat and the Lakers had the shortest offseason in the history of the NBA, and they both
That's right.
sucked last year.
they did.
I know we've already talked about AD in the last pod, how he's made out of glass, and that contributed to why the Lakers lost to the Suns, but they didn't look that sharp. They didn't look that amazing, last year during the season. And, same with the Heat. They had the shortest offseason ever. I think it was like a month or so. Like it was something for 6 weeks. It was crazy short. Normally it's months, but because of the pandemic and COVID. So I think we're going to be rested as long as we hit our shots as well. I think we'll be successful, not only in the series, but tomorrow specifically, because again, our role players shoot better at home. And so, Panos, I think you mentioned the Celtics right now are the best 3-point shooting team in the playoffs. In the regular season, it was the Heat. They were at number 1 in the NBA at 38%.
Yeah,
They're shooting 31% now as a team. In the Celtics or the Sixers series, they shot like 25 and they still won that series, which I think is pretty impressive, right? Shooting that poorly when that was like your bread and butter. But and the Celtics were like 34 in the regular, 35 in the regular season. We were 38. Now the Celtics are 38 and we're like 31. So we've dropped.
Do you expect that to continue in this series, or do you expect some kind of regression back to what they were doing in the regular season?
I mean, I think it's gonna go back to the mean, right? I think like it's got to increase, especially since we have home court advantage again. We haven't had to use the full home court advantage, right? So we haven't seen a game 7 at Miami yet at FTX. So I just feel like Strus is going to shoot better. I think hopefully if Lowry plays and he's 70 to 80% healthy, he should, shoot better. He's been shooting very poorly, and it could be because of the hamstring. But again, I think Oladipo, Vincent, and those types of role players are typically going to shoot better at home. And again, they've had a month slump. That's a long time in the NBA. It's been a month where they've been shooting poorly, and I don't think it's going to sustain. So
one thing I'm really looking forward to seeing is Bam Adebayo's role in this series. During the bubble against Boston, he was Miami's leading scorer.
Yeah,
He was putting up 22, 11, and 5 on 60% shooting. He was contributing with steals and blocks throughout the series. And he hasn't done that to that level so far through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So wondering if he's going to step up and provide that legitimate number 2 threat behind Jimmy, because Jimmy's rolling right now. And if Bam can really start to emerge as that number 2 that we saw in the bubble, that makes the tail of the tape start to edge Miami a little bit.
I was going to add with the Strus thing, he shot 50% during the regular season against Boston Celtics in that series, even though they lost 2-1 in the regular series or season. But I like your point about Bam Adebayo and bringing up Butler. He did average 19 points in the bubble, but now he's averaging 28, almost 29 points a game on I think 53% field goal percentage right now. It's pretty ridiculous how he's improved the past 2 years. And then the matchup that kind of catches me too is because Boston did trade for Al Horford. So I like to see how Al Horford's going to play with Bam. I think that'll be a good matchup for Bam as well, because Al Horford's experienced, right? He's been in the league for a while. He's a vet. and then you have Bam, who's coming in his own, who does have that mid-range jumper too, which is nice, which Amir and I talked about in the past, that if he adds this a jumper to his game, it'll be great. And he's been doing that. Also, Tyler Hero might show up. I hope Tyler Hero does show up as well. But going back to defense on both these teams, I was looking at the team's playoffs, and almost all the starters in the Boston Celtics are averaging about a steal a game. But past that, there's really not much defense coming out of that team on the bench. That's pretty interesting. So,
yeah. So who do you think? So speaking of Tyler Hero, so again, I don't want to monopolize too much of this conversation, so I want to get your guys' opinion, and then I can chime in. So Hero hasn't been himself during the playoffs, right? In these two series. So
yeah.
And there's different reasons why, I guess, based on the two teams that they've played. But he was sixth man of the year. He was averaging 21 points a game off the bench. He was playing more in the regular season. He's playing less because Spo's saying, hey, like your plus minus is like horrendous right now, and you're not shooting very well. So we got to use our depth. So he's averaging, I think, like 14, 15 a game in the playoffs.
He's like
so
13, 14.
13, 14. So
yeah,
he is up and due for a potential max.
Yeah.
Right. And he wants to stay with Miami. Miami wants to sign him.
Mhm.
But as a Miami Heat fan, and if I'm Pat Riley and Mickey Arison, he's coming into his fourth year. This was his breakout season. He's progressed. His rookie year, he was doing really well. He had a really big game against the Celtics in the bubble. He had 37 points.
Yeah.
It was him and Bam's coming out party essentially that year. I think that was the first year Bam was a starter, but second year was a little disappointing. He improved, but not by much. And then he made that leap this year off the bench. So I think he needs to prove himself. He needs to have a really good remainder of the playoffs in order to be considered a max player. So what do you think the matchup is that Tyler can exploit? Because again, the Celtics are the best defensive team left. There's a lot of good individual defenders. He doesn't do the best against length and wings, and that's what Boston has, right? So
Yeah.
Neil, Panos, whoever wants to take this first, just who do you think Tyler can essentially exploit or do well against to be that X factor?
I was just going to ask, do you think Tyler's struggles are matchup based, or is it something larger? Were Philly and Atlanta doing something to get him off his rhythm, or is it just coming down to missing shots right now?
The first series, I think it was slightly matchups. He was missing shots as well. In the first series, he wasn't shooting very well. There's a few games. I think he had two games where he had single digit points, which is just unacceptable. In the Sixers series, they were blitzing him pretty much every time he had the ball. So they were double teaming him quite a bit and trying to get the ball out of his hands. And so I guess it's a compliment that he was the focal point, right? They're like, let's have the other guys on the floor beat us. Then they started putting him on the floor with Jimmy. And so Jimmy's like, okay, if you're going to double team Tyler, this is going to be perfect for me, right? And so Jimmy, got to exploit that scheme. But it's been a combination of the two, I would say.
I don't see Boston trying to double Hero in this series. Of course, we're always going to learn more about strategy and what coaches are thinking by watching a game. But I don't see Boston doubling Hero if he's on the court with Jimmy, given how Jimmy is playing, because Jimmy is pretty much exceeding what Jason Tatum is doing. We talked about this before we hopped on here. They're averaging similar amounts of points per game, but Panos, you said that Jimmy is more efficient so far in the playoffs.
Yeah. Field goal percentage wise, I think free throw too. I mean, I think Jimmy Butler has been more efficient in scoring. And then he's also has less turnovers too. I think it's 1 to 2 turnovers compared to like 4 to 5 with Tatum. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting first game overall series. I think everyone, like Amir said, is the Celtics picking 6 or 7 for Celtics to win the whole thing. But like we said, I think Amir and I agreed on the Heat winning in 6. But with Tyler Hero, I think he's going to show up. Like Amir said, he's due, right? He needs to prove himself, because if he's due for a max contract coming up, I think he'll find those looks. Especially, it also depends on who's on the court with him at when he's in the game, right? So, like you said with Jimmy Butler, if they're gonna most likely they'll double Jimmy, not Tyler Hero, but that should give Tyler Hero some open looks, hopefully. Um,
Yep.
so I'm there. I think that's what Miami and Spode or what they're banking on, right? Jimmy drives in, they try to double him. He'll dish out hopefully most likely Hero, because I mean that's your sixth man. That's your like primary scorer off the bench right there. That's your guy to go to. I think I'm pretty confident he's going to have a good series in this one. I mean, even in the bubble where he had 37 points, and I think he averaged 19 points in that series in the bubble. So
I think that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, he had a decent series in the bubble with them. I think he's only going to improve from there. And if Boston is running their second string against them, I don't know how they're going to do the rotation, but it'll be smart on Boston not to run just their straight second string while Tyler Hero's after, because I think he's just going to eat them up, because their defense on the bench is not as productive as their starting lineup with Boston. So, yeah,
Amir, as a Heat fan, you want to see a lot of Tyler Hero on the floor with Jimmy at the same time?
No, not entirely. They play well sometimes with each other, but Jimmy's ball dominant and doesn't. I mean, it depends. He has different types of moods, I guess, in certain games. So Jimmy is pretty unselfish, but at times, we need him to get a bucket, and especially in the playoffs. The rest of the team has been inconsistent except for him. He's been the
And he kind of took that on. He realized his teammates are struggling a little bit. He's going to be more aggressive offensively, but his natural instinct is to get everybody involved. Yes. And since we're like at the early stages of a series, he's probably going to want to see how his teammates are shooting the ball, if they're making shots. And if they are able to make shots, then it's going to make him be more unselfish if we're talking about a game one scenario.
You know what? I was going to say, sorry, Amir, but like I was going to say, like Bam, for a big man, he's a pretty decent passer too. He likes to get his teammates involved as well. So I like that about the Heat as well. It's like, yeah, they can get theirs, but I like how they try to get everyone involved, like you guys said earlier.
I'd say he's more than decent, Panos. And not being biased, he averaged before Lowry got here, and because he didn't have a true point guard, because Dragic, is obviously more of a combo guard. He averaged 5 assists per game last year. So yeah, Bam's one of his biggest skill sets, I think, is passing. And also that's kind of a issue with him because he becomes passive a lot in terms of taking big men off the dribble, right? Or like actually taking mid-range jumpers when they're in the drop. So he needs to be more aggressive and more alpha like Jimmy. He typically likes to pass, get his teammates involved. He needs to be more aggressive and understand sometimes in matchups like you have a huge advantage over almost most centers in the NBA, I would say, right? Like Bam is a very athletic and skilled center, right? And there's not a ton of those. Maybe there's like 7 or 8 that I can think of, right? And so, and he's not even like, again, Brook Lopez, and last year pretty much shut Bam down because he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't attacking him. He wasn't taking mid-range jumpers, which he was working on a lot last year and actually shot pretty well. So, but yeah, I don't think Hero, going back to your original question, I think Hero is better off the bench without Jimmy because then he could be more aggressive. He takes the most shots on the team. So we want Tyler to shoot. And with Jimmy on the floor, he defers a lot and kind of just stands around more. So I think getting him more involved with Bam, giving Bam a rest and then bringing him back out at the tail end of Tyler's minutes, because he usually comes in with like 5 minutes to go or so in the first quarter. So he usually does really well with Bam.
That was more of an adjustment that Spo made in the middle of the 76er series to have Butler and Hero share the floor.
Yeah, because they realized that they were blitzing Tyler when he was on the floor, and they didn't want him to be the primary scorer. And he had trouble with decision making and kind of passing and keeping control of the ball when he's double teamed like that. So it wasn't always successful because he started passing a lot earlier. But the Celtics wings who are going to be doing that potentially. I don't see them doing it all the time, but of course I feel like they will test it out, are more athletic, longer, better defenders, right? Like if Marcus Smart's doing that with Jaylen Brown, or Tatum, that's more of a deadly combination compared to like a Maxi and a Harden doing it to Tyler Hero, right? Or like a Maxi and a George's Niang, right? So
it would represent a pretty significant shift in defensive strategy from Boston because they were just primarily concerned with Giannis and occasionally Drew with the ball. They weren't doing a lot of trapping. So if they did resort to that, it would definitely be a significant deviation from what they have been doing. And that might be something we see later in the series. But I think in a game one, you built your record off of your top ranked defense, just kind of play it out and see how it goes. That's what's really going to be interesting about this series as it gets further along is the kind of adjustments that are made. But usually in a game one, you kind of just want to roll the ball out there, see what you're working with, who's finding a groove. And then as you start to get more data points about how the other team is playing you, then you can start thinking about adjustments, which Spo has demonstrated he's great at. Ime, in the limited amount of times he's been a head coach, he's done a pretty good job of that too. So it'll be interesting to see that in maybe a game 4, game 5 type of situation. But game one sounds like we should just expect to see Hero get his chances to kind of lead the second unit, score as much as possible, and hopefully break out of this kind of mini slump he's been in. My next question for you, Amir, would be what about the Celtics are you most concerned about?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a few things. I don't know. I want to say 3-point shooting. I think I'll probably say 3-point shooting because right now they're the number one shooting team in the playoffs, right? They're shooting the 38% that the Heat were shooting in the regular season, right? And that's a high number for a team to average in a game. And I think they shoot more threes than the Heat do. And so that can change the whole dynamic of the series if they're hitting shots and they have such a good defensive team, then I think we're in trouble, right? So we need to stop Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and I guess maybe Grant Williams from getting good clean shots. We can live with Marcus Smart because he's a little more inconsistent, or a Pritchard off the bench, or anyone else essentially, like even Brown, I guess. I mean, I think not letting Jason Tatum get into rhythm, I think will be huge. And we could do that by switching. I think PJ is going to start off guarding him at first, but we're going to do soft switches, right? So I feel like we're going to try to keep PJ on him at all times, but Bam could switch to him immediately. Butler could switch to him immediately. Kyle Lowry comes back in the series. He's like a little bulldog. He's a really good defender. We actually had him on Tobias Harris for a while, who's 6'10", and Lowry's probably 5'10" in reality, right? So yeah, I think it's just the 3-point shooting. And we were the number one team in terms of defense against 3-pointers, right? So we try to limit giving teams that corner 3, which is the shortest 3 and the easiest 3 that a team can make, right? So I feel like, again, both teams are going to be good at this, right? There's no wall. Like, I don't think we need to put up a wall against Jason Tatum because we have good enough defenders and good enough switch defense rotations, right? That we can still give him trouble, right? And anybody can guard anybody on the floor on both sides, right? On the Celtics or the Heat. So I think it comes down to shooting because they're both going to play amazing defense, right? So I feel like whoever shoots better, because they both like to shoot threes, that could be a huge factor in the series. And I'm afraid of the Celtics because they just made 22 threes in the last game they played, right? So
I was going to ask you, Amir, are you concerned about like the bigs that the Celtics can throw at Bam, like with Horford and Williams and both Williams, actually, Robert, and you know what I mean?
Yes and no, because they're all good defenders and pretty versatile, but Bam's quicker than all of them and crafty enough. He just needs to be aggressive. If he can get them on their heels, he can blow by them at times, right? Like Horford's surprisingly good this playoff series at age
Yeah.
35. Like he's
Mhm.
had a renaissance. I feel like a reemergence after Giannis gave him whatever that look was in game 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But yes, because they have 3 good defenders that can guard Bam, but no, because that they're none of them are named Joel Embiid, none of them are named Nikola Jokic. None of them are named. Who else does he do bad against? Those are the 2 that I know historically. Bam has been either afraid of or just has been bullied by.
Extreme size. I feel like
Yeah,
Horford is an undersized power forward. Time Lord kind of fits the same description, and Grant Williams isn't very big either, but extreme size to the 7 foot like an Embiid. That's really where he starts getting taken off of his rhythm.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they tried their hardest against Giannis, did a great job, but Giannis still got his buckets during that series too. So you make a good point there.
and he's not going to be triple teamed.
No, there's no way.
Right. Yeah. So what do you guys think the matchups will be? So the starting lineup, I'm sure you guys know the starting lineups for both teams. I guess with the Celtics, it's a little more up in the air because of Grant Williams, right? Is he going to start or come off the bench for the other Williams? So
I was going to add Marcus Smart is also questionable, but he's obviously most likely going to play. It's the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, that could be a key factor there too. If he's out,
That'll help I'm gonna for sure.
I would definitely say Miami's gonna win by a -5 then at that point, right? I think it would jump from he's that impactful of a player because who's going to come off the bench? Pritchard? Who's going to start? I mean, from the bench. Like that's a huge advantage for us.
I'm just wondering if when Lowry's going to come back to the series. Like, what's his role going to?
Yeah, like which Lowry when he comes back.
Yeah, I want to know like what type of Lowry are we going to get? What's he going to be able to do? Is his minutes going to be capped, or like what's his injury? Is it a hamstring or?
Yeah, it's a hamstring. I mean, I guess it depends on how healthy he is, right? So
yeah,
we'll see. But anyway, what do you think the matchups are going to be? Let's say Smart and Grant Williams are playing. They want to give the Time Lord, some more
6
time.
6 men off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a knee injury, that he's probably re-aggravated, I guess, last series. So he'll probably come off the bench. But just what do you think the defensive matchups are going to be? Who do you think the Heat are going to defend?
Who's the starting lineup for the Heat in game 1 right now?
So Tucker is probably going to start off on Jason, I mean.
Yep. So
okay.
Panos, to answer your question, though, it's going to be Vincent, Strus, Butler, PJ, and Bam.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the best optimal defensive lineup? I guess, like, what are the best matchups from the Heat's perspective? Who would you match up with?
I think
Tucker on Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Then you put Brown on Jaylen Brown, or Butler on Jaylen Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Bam would probably take Horford. And then you got Vincent on Marcus
It's going to have to be Marcus Smart, yeah. And then Strus is guarding, did we say it's going to be Grant
Williams?
That's a mismatch body. Like isn't he bigger than Strus? Like,
yeah, but we're going to see Grant Williams kind of hanging out on the corner 3 area. I don't know if he has much of a post game.
No, he doesn't really.
So I don't see that would be problematic. You could maybe just keep Strus patrolling the perimeter, prevent the corner 3 for Grant Williams.
Yeah, I mean, those are good matchups. I mean, I think that's going to be ideal, right? You're not going to have like Gabe Vincent on someone other than Marcus Smart in that situation. And if Horford's starting, you need Bam on him, right? I mean, you're not going to. The one thing I do like about PJ Tucker, he's willing to guard the big man too. It showed when he was guarding AD when he was on Houston and during the bubble. So I like PJ Tucker where he can probably switch off if that were to happen, if he needed to switch off and go to guard a big man. It's good that they have Tucker. But yeah, I agree with Neil on the matchups. I don't see how else you would do it. It's would like Tucker and Butler switch off sometimes?
That's probably the only other major adjustment that would be possible.
Yeah, that would be a great matchup with Tatum and Butler.
Yeah, if they were guarding each other, maybe you see that in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
But how would you rate Jimmy Butler's defensive ability in relation to PJ Tucker's? Is there a big drop off, or are they pretty much the same, you think?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer. I mean, they're different types of defenders. Jimmy's better at like playing the passing lanes, like I'm sure you've noticed it a lot in the playoffs. He gets a lot of passes that he intercepts like at the top of the key from like a cross court kind of pass, and he intercepts it and he has like a dunk by himself, right? So like he's better at like the passing lanes, I would say.
So he's good at reading the plays then.
Yeah, he's kind of like a free safety out there. He's still a good individual defender, but I know Tucker's a little bit slower now because he's 36 years old.
But he's going to make you feel him, he's going to be physical.
Yeah, he leans on people more.
Out.
He uses his stockiness. He's got
Gets
pretty
under your skin.
He moves his feet well. He's slower, obviously, right? And like he can't keep up with the quick, younger guards in the NBA, but he can move his feet really quickly and he could beat a lot of folks to spots, and he could just he's like a pest in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
He was playing basically in the last series full court press against James Harden, giving him no airspace, right? Like he's 36 and he's doing full court press against Harden. Harden's still, even though he's washed, he's definitely still quicker, right? Than PJ Tucker. He's not as big as PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker definitely weighs at least 30 pounds more than Harden, right? Or maybe not, who knows? But yeah, they're both really good defenders. They just are different, but they're both going to switch back and forth, I feel like, on the same position, maybe even multiple times with Jaylen Brown and Tatum, right? They're going to be interchangeable. The whole team's going to switch, and so is the Celtics, right? I mean, Marcus Smart might want to try to get a screen to play on PJ because he's having trouble running around Gabe Vincent, who's younger and who's quicker, right? So he might call for a screen, and maybe, I mean, like PJ Tucker is not invincible, right? Like he's getting older, he's slower. So like I've seen a lot of people try to switch onto PJ Tucker and attack him, right? Because he's not going to be sustainable to like stop players on every possession throughout a game. So, but if he does that, I mean, PJ Tucker is still capable of guarding Marcus Smart.
Yeah, definitely.
He pestered Trey, like in the first series, like he was switching on the Trey.
He also pestered Kevin Durant, remember?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
that
so
too.
He'll be able to hold his own for sure.
So how big of an impact do you think PJ Tucker will have, Neil? Like we saw in Game 7, the Bucks had trouble stopping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tatum, right? And I'm sure the Bucks really missed having a PJ Tucker on their team. So
like,
how valuable do you think he
undercovered
is?
storyline. Without PJ Tucker, they had to resort to using Brooke Lopez patrol the perimeter. So PJ Tucker has a lot of value in this series, and he will be able to let Jimmy kind of cook offensively during the early parts of the game. And then if Jimmy wants to take on guarding Tatum in the fourth in crunch time, Spo will be able to kind of move the chess pieces around. He'll probably try both of them, and maybe one of them is doing a much better job of guarding Tatum and then keep him on there. But it's not like when you put the other one on Jaylen Brown, it's not like you're putting him on a zero offensively. They're still going to have their hands full, but you just got to play the matchups, see how things are going in Game 1. Maybe Butler matches up better with Jaylen Brown, so you keep him on Jaylen Brown. It's a lot of discovery in a Game 1. You're just trying to see what's working, what's not, and then that's going to set the stage for more dramatic adjustments as the series gets going. And if we're talking about this Game 1 situation, we've mentioned the rest a couple times, and I think that's what makes it important for the Heat to kind of get out in front, put something on tape that Boston has to think about, and then they're already going to be thinking about what adjustments they're going to make in the future. We don't know what we're going to get from Robert Williams. He's been very limited this postseason. He's probably played like 3 games maximum, if that. So they don't even know what they're getting there. And then Miami has a similar problem with Lowry. He's been ruled out for Game 1.
Yeah. Who do you think is more important to their team, Lowry or Robert Williams? Because both impactful.
Yeah.
And I mean, Lowry's older. It's not, if this is Kyle Lowry from 3 years ago, then this wouldn't even be a question, right?
Yeah.
So He's 36, like, or 35. I think he just turned either 35 or 36, so he's getting up there. So who do you think is more impactful for their team
Oof.
and for this series, essentially?
I think that's the more important question, because when Williams was injured against Milwaukee, we were wondering how that would impact Boston's defense, the team defense. But I would say they still did a pretty damn good job against Milwaukee, even without someone who was thought to be the primary sort of nucleus of that defense. So
Yep.
Boston has been able to survive fairly well without Robert Williams, and so has Miami without Lowry.
Yes.
When Lowry came back, they tried to bring him back for game 3. He was limited, and Miami, they gave him a chance. They played him in 2 games to see what was going on, just to make sure that it was the right move to take him out. But as soon as they took out Lowry, the offense was just fine. They rolled Philadelphia after that.
Mhm.
So I think it's really a testament to the next man up mentality from both sides. There hasn't been a noticeable drop off. But then as you move against a matchup on the other team, the matchups might be slightly different. So maybe Boston might need Robert Williams for this particular series in a way that we haven't seen yet. And maybe Miami might need Lowry in a way we haven't seen yet against Boston. So it's hard to answer that question. But given the information that we have right now, I feel like neither team has really significantly missed those players to this point.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, it might be more uh, important to get Robert Williams back on the court just to add another big on the floor, and also another defensive-minded shot blocking center. I know he's undersized, but he's obviously really good at blocking players. He averaged over 2.5 or so blocks per game. But it's funny watching the Heat every time when we finally had a few windows throughout the season where everybody was healthy. So I think this is probably after like the first month and a half of the season where the Gabe Vincents, the Struces, the Caleb Martins were stepping in for when Jimmy and Bam and Lowry were out, where they actually got extra playing time and they got to put in and show all the work, all the development, right, behind the scenes, the summer leagues, the G leagues, right, and getting called up on those 10-day contracts. They got meaningful minutes because of injuries, and they showed out, right? They started playing really well, having huge games individually at times against big teams. And so it was funny, like after Jimmy came back and Bam came back and then Lowry came back, we started playing bad again. Like when we had like all of our players available, and then Kyle went out for a few games for personal reasons or so. And then Gabe Vincent came back in the lineup and we started winning again. And then like Bam, or not Bam, excuse me, it was Jimmy, because Jimmy kept having all these little random injuries throughout the season, which is basically like load management. He had like inflammation in his big toe or something. It was like one of the reasons why he didn't play. But like Jimmy goes out and then like all of a sudden Caleb Martin comes in and starts playing, and he starts playing really well and the Heat play well. So we've had that next man up mentality, but for some odd, weird reason throughout the entire season, when we have a full deck of cards, for some reason, like we don't play as good. Like that chemistry kind of goes away. Like people don't know what to do now, right? Because the roles, the lineups are a little bit different, right? And so I think it might be Williams, but
Yeah, it's
who
hard
knows?
to incorporate a star after they've been injured. It's not just a plug and play situation.
Amir,
Unless
I
they're a
want to
superstar.
Amir, I was going to ask you, do you think in a there'll be a situation where Spo would talk to like Lowry if you were to come back for this series, maybe to come off the bench possibly, or would they just automatically put him as a starter? You know what I mean? Let Gabe
No,
Vincent go in there, do his
I
thing,
mean,
and
I just think personally, if he's not close to 100%, then you don't play him, because we signed him for 3 years, 30 million each year, and we have a good nucleus, right? And a young slash veteran team that is going to compete for the next few years, right? Like if it could be like a Chris Paul, where Chris Paul's getting up there in age, he's a little bit younger than Chris Paul. If he can contribute like he did in the regular season, Lowry averaged 14 points, 7 assists, a few rebounds, like a steal. Like if you can contribute that in that way, and he'll get more rest obviously during the regular season in the next few years. But we don't want to have like a lingering hamstring injury like James Harden potentially has. Right? People say he might be washed because he keeps re-aggravating his injury. He's gained weight and he's been on different teams, different players, coaches, yada yada yada. I don't think you risk it for the future because Bam is 24, Hero's 21. Jimmy's still 32. Like, I guess that's being 32 is all relevant because James Harden is also 32, but it looks like he's 42. But yeah, I just don't think you put him out there unless he's close to 90% or almost 100%. You just see if
They've been doing fine without him.
they've been doing fine without
Exactly.
him. Let's see if we can get to the finals and give him another week off, right? Like more, maybe I would assume it'd be like 8-9 days, right? If he doesn't play this series plus the 3 or 4 days they had off, so gave him at least a couple weeks to heal. Well, actually, he had more time than that because he didn't play game 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
And so he's that would give him like 2.5 weeks essentially if he can somehow make it to the finals. So yeah, I don't think you play him at all if he's not close to 100%.
Well, say Saber, like let's just say hypothetically, like say he was 100%. Would you like to see him come off the bench, or do you think Spo would just automatically put him as a starter?
Automatically put him as a starter.
You think because you know how you said Gabe Vincent came in and they were playing well and they did it against Philly. Do you think it'll be a good idea to put him as a starter right off the bat if he were
100%? He hasn't missed months.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's not like he's missed like 50 games or 20 games or 10 games. It's like he missed a week and a half of basketball, right? Like I know like he's gonna need to hit the bike or whatever if he can. I don't know if he can with the stationary bike with the hammy injury, but like he might be a little out of shape. He already looks a little heavier himself anyway in general. But no, he's your point guard. He's your starting point guard, and he's a championship point guard, right? Like he gives you that veteran leadership and experience, and he puts people into position and into better spots, right? He can orchestrate and help set up the offense to be more effective. So I think you do like, and he's been very passive throughout the entire season, honestly. So like we still need his passing ability and his assist, even though we also need him to start shooting more, which he did at the end of the season. He started actually shooting like 7-8 more shots per game towards the end and had a few 20-point games. There was a couple games where he had bagels throughout the season in the regular season, which was really frustrating. He wasn't shooting or being aggressive either. So, but if he's healthy, we put him back on the floor. He's our starting point guard. He's a championship point guard. He's going to help us. Like we theoretically need him in this series, right? I think unless Hero becomes that X factor, steps up and gets that 21 points a game off the bench. Bam, needs to produce a little bit more, be aggressive. And then Depot, we haven't even talked about Depot. Like if Oladipo can get you like 14, 15 points off the bench, then we don't need Lowry because we're deep enough. Vincent's going to, just hit a couple shots, when necessary, like hit a couple threes. He's not the best playmaker, but he's going to do what's necessary, right? Like he's going to give the ball to Jimmy and Bam and Hero and set his teammates up.
Do you think that's Miami's biggest edge in this series, their depth?
Yeah,
I do. What do you think? What do you guys think about
100%? Yeah, I agree. And they have better depth. I think they have better bench production as far as scoring goes too, compared to the Boston Celtics.
Boston definitely doesn't have a Tyler Hero that can go off for 30 off the bench. That's for sure.
Or a Victor Oladipo, who's a former All-Star and also another amazing two-way player that was locking up James Harden.
He might get that
too.
15 points a game with that second string on Boston too. So there's a good shot at that.
Yeah. All right. So again, obviously as the resident Heat fan, getting to monopolize this whole conversation. So I noticed you guys are obviously asking me a lot about my opinion. So that was fun. Thanks for being nice about it, Panos, because when the Lakers are in this scenario, which they hopefully won't be in a long time, because I hate them. I'm not going to be as nice.
6 years here.
I'm not going to be as nice. I'm not going to be as supportive, and I'm going to grill you. So
you can grill me all you want.
So quick question. So who is this series more important for? Do you think it's more important for Jimmy Butler to get back to the finals and to win it potentially this year? Or do you think it's more important for Jason Tatum to win it? He's been in the Eastern Conference Finals 4 now out of the last 6 years. The Celtics have been in 40 Eastern Conference Finals out of the 75 years since the NBA merger or whatever, some ridiculous freaking stat, right? Obviously, we know they have 17 championships. But who is the series more you think important for? Is
I
it
gotta
Jason
say
Tatum
Butler.
finally getting to the finals or Jimmy
I
Butler?
have to say Butler. It's only because of age. Butler's 32, Tatum's 24. Presumably speaking, nothing's guaranteed. I mean, the Suns are a tire fire right now, and they thought they had a window that was going to last for at least a couple more years. So you can't take this for granted. But simply because of age, I gotta say this series means more to Jimmy because he's 32, Tatum's 24, and this is a fairly wide open tournament we're in right now. I would not be surprised to see any of these 4 teams that are left take it down. So in your locker room, you got Lowry, who's a veteran, Butler, that's a veteran. The Warriors, they're similarly aged, but they have 3 championships already. So they don't have the entire sort of sense of urgency. So out of all 4 teams left, I think Miami should have the most sense of urgency because 2 of their primary core players are up there in age. Lowry does have a ring, but I think Jimmy has kind of assumed the mantle as the face of the franchise right now. And he really needs to cash in on getting a ring this year, because you just can't take it for granted that you'll be back here again.
I 100% agree. I think if people say Tatum, it's because getting to the finals and not even winning necessarily wouldn't be a bad thing. For him, it's a good marker because he is 23, 24. And the team is young. I mean, his teammate Brown obviously is also really young as well. So they're going to be competing, for the foreseeable future. So the only reason why I could see people saying Tatum more important is because then for the reason that he gets into that possible top 5, top 7, conversation, right? Like if he gets to the finals, does that put him ahead of certain players like the ADs, or I guess maybe, I don't know, Harden hasn't been in that conversation for maybe 2 years now, but
I don't even know if AD deserves to be in the conversation.
No, he does
oh,
not.
he's not anymore.
He's not even top 10.
Not even top 10. He's
He might be borderline 15.
15. Yeah, Panos and I are always on the same page with. As much as I hate the Lakers, Panos and I are typically on the same page.
I do want to add to the Butler thing though. I agree with the Butler take. I think he's hungry and they left a bad taste in his mouth in the bubble. Also, I think he wants to prove a point because not only because of his age, but he went from the Bulls to the Wolves to Philly. I feel like he probably feels like teams have given up on him or he's not that guy, but he wants to prove to like the league, like, this is me. I'm going to win you a title this year and I'm going to win it for the Heat. I feel like he has a chip on his shoulder with that too.
He's had a chip on his shoulder since he got into the league.
Yeah. I mean, isn't there a story about him? I mean, probably more about this, was he homeless or something? Or yeah.
Yep. He was played JC basketball. Was like living from his car. Got no offers. Got drafted 30th in the first round, right? Like last pick in the first round. Didn't play his rookie season more than like 3 minutes a game. Like just crazy trajectory that he's been on, right? Since, I mean, from a personal perspective to a professional perspective, right? So like on both levels, he's definitely stepped up in a big way to improve his life and his professional life as well. So yeah, he's not for everyone, man, but I just hope that he found a home, and we have all that talk about the cliche Miami Heat culture, but it seems like it's a real fit, right? And I'm really hoping.
I mean, you could see why he hated playing with Ben Simmons.
Right.
It's easy to see how that sort of relationship could sour quickly based on what we know about those two. So 100%. It made sense for him to leave Philly. I think he's probably doing some Jedi mind stuff in terms of trying to frame it that they were okay with letting him go, but given the presence of Ben Simmons on that roster, I don't think it was something he was upset about. I mean, look where he ended up. He ended up in the place that was right for him because there's no way he would be able to coexist. I mean, that Philly team had a lot of potential. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you have Embiid, you have Butler, you still had Harris, and Ben Simmons was actually playing. But
Mhm.
we kind of were starting to see the writing on the wall about what Ben Simmons was, and he wasn't going to coexist with Jimmy. We already saw what happened with Jimmy in Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns. I mean,
Right.
you need to be a certain kind of player to coexist well with Jimmy Butler, and Miami is full of those kind of people. So it's the perfect place for him.
I agree. Yeah, couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. All right, guys. I think it's time to wrap it up. Been on this podcast for a little while now, so thanks again for joining me tonight. So yeah, just again, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll come out with some more content in a few days. I'm actually going to be out of town, going to Denver for a work conference for the next 4 days or so. So hopefully we can get back on this weekend and do some recaps on some of the games that we're going to
Yeah,
be
we'll probably be halfway
missing.
to an Eastern Conference and Western Conference champion by that time.
Yeah, we'll see. Crossing our fingers that it's going to be Miami versus either the Warriors or Dallas, right? Either way,
Luca and versus the Heat. The Luca
You-
Mavs versus the Heat.
They have
The-
a history. They have a very interesting history. The Heat and the Mavericks do.
I actually like Luca and love Luca, and
Yeah.
I don't like the Mavs. I hate the Mavs because of our history, as you mentioned. But
Love-hate relationship.
I'd take the Mavs over the Warriors if I choose. Let's put up a wall on Luca. Like let Finney Smith and other guys beat us, honestly, and we get home court advantage. With the Warriors, we wouldn't get home court advantage, and we'd be playing against a team that has won 3 championships, right? So
Yeah.
their core are vets and champs, right? That are probably still hungry to win, right? And again, Luca, has youth on his side, right? Like if he doesn't win, he'll be back. He's only going to get better. But the Warriors window is shutting down quickly, right? Like they probably have this season and the next 2 possibly, right? And that's
I was
it.
going to say 2 or 3 seasons max.
because
and
of the
that's it.
Memphis, like the
The
Grizzlies
West
are going
is
to
going
come
to be
from.
completely loaded next year. I mean,
The West? Oh, yeah.
Right.
we're not even talking about the Clippers who get Kawhi back. Jamal Murray's coming back. The West is going to – the West was down this year. I think it's fair to say that, but it will be back pretty soon.
It was definitely down. It was like the last couple of years have been like the first couple of years that the 8th seed has been below 500. It's usually the East historically for the last 20
Yeah.
years, 7th and 8th seed were typically below 500, right? And you could still make it to the playoffs.
Mhm.
And in the West, like the 10th seed would be like 10 games above 500, 6 games above 500 and not make it. Yet the 7th seed in the East would be like 2-3 games below, right? Or even. 8th seed was like almost 100%. I feel like always below 500, which was crazy. So yeah, the tables have turned, I guess, in the past few years. And so a little more top heavy in the East, I would say.
Yeah, I
Top.
think the clear top 4 teams in the East throughout the season made it. You could argue that maybe Brooklyn is better than Philadelphia, but it was still very top heavy this year.
It was. All right, guys. Thanks again. And yeah, looking forward to the next episode.
See ya.
Been real.
Take care.